There's no question that there's a lot of employees who are pushing back on the idea of returning to the office, are using I don't know if it's an excuse or the belief, perceived or real, that you don't trust me to do my work from home. When in reality, that actually, not in reality, 50% of the times, or maybe more, that's probably the case, because we have a lot of old school managers that are used to micromanaging, are used to being able to walk around the office and dictating and watching and managing that way. But there's another group, I like to consider myself in that group, that is really more performance based. And I don't care what time you start, what time you end, as long as, here's a quarterly objective, get your quarterly objective done. And as long as that's done, I don't care how you do it or where you do it. But there is something, though, to be said about the hybrid work environment and coming in for the creativity, the spontaneity that happens in those types of environment. So understanding what's right for your work, and then translating that. There's a communication issue. There's an education issue that managers have to be able to do.
Yeah, there's a huge one. And I've had that chance to help organizations craft some of that communication, or to give feedback after that communication has happened. And I think you stated it right. Like, the right answer for where people ought to be working and how people ought to be working should be based on the work, right? And some people think, Sam, well, Kevin, you wrote 3 books that have the word long distance in it, so you must be kind of a zealot for remote work. I am not. I'm a zealot for highly effective work. And so that means that I believe that in many cases it can be done at a distance, but it doesn't mean it needs to be, or has to be, or in every case even should be. And so the first thing I would say to any organization, any leaders that are trying to communicate the fact that, hey, we want to go hybrid, or we want to standardize what we've been trying to move toward, and it's going to be people in the office some or all of the time, then the first thing that you've got to do is be really clear about the business reasons why. Really clear about the business reasons why. And too often it comes down to a lot of discussion about why you're going to almost remember that you liked the office and it'll really be okay, as opposed to here. Now, nothing wrong with that conversation, but that all needs to come after the conversation about what are the business reasons why. Listen, I'm proud of how this organization did during the pandemic, and we had to shift. We did a lot of things. And the reality is that we're slipping on some of our KPIs. And we believe that if people were in the office 2 days a week on average, and we figure out how to do work effectively in both scenarios, that we can come closer to reaching our KPIs. We can come closer to reaching our revenue goals. Like, let's talk about the business need and why the change to that will make a difference. And if you do that, in a credible way, for the most part, people that are engaged and care about your organization are going to say, okay, might not be my first choice, right? Like, most of the surveys that said about where people want to work, they asked, like, where do you want to work? Well, a lot of people are going to say, sure, 80% of people are going to say, I'd rather be home most of the time. Mm-hmm. But if you say, what's the best way for us to be successful as an organization? More people will say, well, it's probably some of each. Like, I want to be able to work at home some of the time, but there's value in me coming into the office, and there's value in me being able to collaborate face to face, even though we can collaborate, separately. I mean, I wrote 3 books with Wayne, and we never were together when we wrote any of them, right? So it certainly can be done. My team has been virtual for years, so it certainly can be done. And yet we know that there are benefits to being in the same space. So then the next job of the leader is to make sure that when that's what we do, that we craft the work differently on those days. Like, you've heard the people who say, and there are people listening that have said this, like, why did I have to come to the office? I did exactly the same thing I did at home. To which I would say, then you shouldn't have had to come in. If the day isn't different when you're here, if there aren't more blocks of time when you're home where you're uninterrupted so you can get quality work done, and there's more time when you're in the office, when you are in meetings, you are collaborating, you are doing those things, that's when we're heading in the right direction. But if we're just saying we're going to be in 2 days a week because it's going to make it better, but we're not changing the way the days are when we're in or when we're out, what's the point?